All right, let me share this screen. So we're going to go over the narrative assignment. Um, I like to call the Tapestry and Thread. You'll see why. Um, keep in mind the readings that we've done. The each of the readings that we've done have been in the vignette fashion, and then the assignment sheet itself is in vignette fashion. And so this should um, be a solid idea of what these vignettes are that I'm talking about. Um, beyond that, it's a fairly typical narrative. Um, so the expectation for this assignment is that you'll craft a narrative that exemplifies the conventions appropriate to the narrative genre. So those conventions are going to be it. Essentially, it's not a academic uh, in its voicing. You know that it's personable to some degree. There's some pathos, meaning emotion, that the reader can engage with. There's a story. Um, it's composed of a series of vignettes, loosely defined as short passages, story fragments, or sections. And then throughout each vignette, you will weave an object. And we'll get into that in the next vignette. Each vignette should be separated from one another by some form of page break as shown below. So I like these lines. You can do asterisks. You can do whatever you like as long as there's a physical page break. If there are not physical page breaks, it is not a vignette. Um, don't add like 15 spaces between them. There has to be some sort of physical object on the page breaking the sections. So here's if there's a tricky part, here's the tricky part. A primary element of your narrative is to be an extended metaphor. Remember, a metaphor is when you compare something directly. So a simile is the moon is like cheese. A metaphor is the moon is cheese. Um, this metaphor should appear in your story as a sort of object. And so don't get too hung up on this. Some really struggle with taking their metaphor and making a physical object out of it. It does not have to be a physical object. You know, we've talked about, if your story is about time, it's about kind of you grappling with growing up, becoming a young adult and things like that, and you're looking at time, it could be a watch is sort of a physical object that you could do. Um, but you could also just sort of reflect on time, like capital T time, as a kind of philosophical object. And so this object can be real or imagined, conceptual, metaphorical, literal, and anything in between. Don't get too hung up on this. I'm not worried. I'm not looking for anything in particular here. Um, if some people are very concrete thinkers, and so they have physical object in their story, some are more abstract, and so it's a bit more loose. I'm not ultimately worried about this. This is meant to sort of be to inspire your writing, not to hold you back. So if this ends up getting in the way, you're like, I can't wrap my head around this, or the story just kind of goes in a direction that you're ultimately happy with, but there's not really a clear object in it, um, will be okay. If this is kind of this secondary, this is meant to sort of spur you into writing something interesting. But if you write something interesting without this necessarily featuring heavily, um, I won't hold it against you. Um, the way that the speaker and or characters relate to, interact with, understand, or define best metaphor or object should, to whatever degree you choose, establish some kind of theme or meaning for your reader to experience. So this is all that I really care about, that I'm looking for. There's two minutes there. Is that there's some kind of theme or there's a sense of meaningfulness as I read your story. That it feels like the story is about something in particular. That something can be quite vague or quite specific. It doesn't matter as long as when I get done reading your story, there's a sense of structure. There's a sense of this story explored something in particular. Um, well or not well doesn't really matter as long as the experience is interesting. So I think of, My Grandfather's Fire is clearly about, you know, the grandmother, the grandfather, um, and the grandfather's alcoholism. It's about a number of things, but it's definitely about kind of this complicated situationship, right? Letham's piece about Star Wars, it's about a lot. It's about nothing really in particular, but it's definitely there are themes there about coming of age. The physical object is going to the movies, right? And um, that can mean a whole lot of different things and is explored in a lot of different ways. But there's definitely a sense of it's all orbiting something central, even if we can't necessarily define what that central thing is, that doesn't matter, as long as there's that sense that it is in orbit around that theme or that meaningful object. Don't overthink this, just write. Memory minds have a proclivity to do this. What I ultimately just want you to be sensitive to is don't just write about a bunch of random things. That's really what you want to avoid is kind of going off in these random directions, saying a lot without really saying anything in particular. So just sort of have an idea of what am I exploring? Am I exploring growing up? And I exploring my relationship to this person I care about or this person who, you know, um, harmed me, or is it my relationship to my, high school career as an athlete or my hobbies, whatever it might be. Have there be some sort of central motif. And if you know what that is, then you can kind of think about what your object might be. But yeah, this doesn't have to be super clear. And often it should be a little fuzzy. The more we kind of hit the nail on the head, the less um, room our reader has to explore. And so, um, yeah, don't overthink this. All I really care about here is that the story is ultimately kind of about something. Even if that something is very, very fuzzy, I'll know it when I see it. Um, your work should make use of vignettes. Vignettes are brief, anywhere from one sentence to one page. One page is very, very long for a vignette. I usually recommend like no longer than half a page, a third of a page. A quarter of a page is really optimal. Anywhere from a quarter to a third of a page is really optimal. Definitely no more than like 100 words in a vignette. Now, if you end up going over that, that's fine. That's okay. These are just recommendations. There's really no rules. Um, Vignettes tend to jump around, telling a story in a patchwork fashion. This is really hopefully going to help so you can kind of just say what you have to say and then move on. There's not that pressure to kind of, expand sort of, a lot of students use the word fluff to add a bunch of fluff to get that page count. These are going to add quite a bit of space. And so you don't have to worry about getting that kind of inflated page count. Just be succinct, get to the point, share only the interesting bits. Kind of imagine, I don't want to, if this is a soup, right? I don't want a soup that's all broth, and like vegetables. Like I just want the meat and potatoes, right? I just want the good stuff. So, uh, don't give me the fluff. Like not too much broth, not too much veggies, meat and potatoes. If that's hopefully that's not a terrible metaphor. Um, this work should be a tapestry, hence the name Tapestry and Thread. Should be a tapestry of different memories and thoughts that, when all woven together by the through line of your object or your theme, tells a story that is greater than the sum of its parts. And it's really like the A level paper for me. The A level paper is the paper that is greater than the sum of its parts, that everything is working together, even if just a little bit, because you just get one draft. So I'm not grading these super roughly. So experiment. I'm just looking for interesting stories that make me feel something or make me chuckle once, or it just made me think, oh, that's a cool thing to have done structurally. If you do one interesting thing somewhat well, that's an A paper in my mind. But this is really the measure of that when it feels like what you're doing in this paper is greater than any particular vignette, right? Because if I say, oh, here's one really good vignette, that might not be enough for an A. Um, but it might say like, here's one really good vignette that really ties it all together, kind of like in My Grandfather's Fire. The story's okay. It's finely written, but that last vignette, the way that last vignette ties it all together and makes it not just a story, but kind of this summary of this very intense human life, the way that the grandfather is revealed in that moment that revealing casts itself over the whole story, and the whole story just kind of sings in that moment. It all comes together and is whole and is greater than some of its parts. Kind of like humans. Humans are greater than some of their parts. We're more than our lives, right? We're more than our individual choices. We're greater than the sum of our parts. So stories should have that quality as well. And this isn't something you can use technique to get. You just got to do it. It just happens um, as a product of being vulnerable and telling a story that only you can tell. Be sure to practice audience awareness and genre awareness as you craft your narrative. It should evoke emotions. And then here's some ideas of like what you can write about, scenes or exposition. We talked about that a bit in class. With most essays being a blend of the two. Um, right. This essay is meant to be challenging. Your choice of scenes, ideas are crucial. Each vignette should be doing something, should be adding something to your story. It should have some kind of, even if very fuzzy, a purpose. Um, and again, you don't have to necessarily know exactly what that purpose is in the sense that you can, write down here in one sentence, here's what the purpose of this is. But you have an intuitive sense. We often, as artists, we know when we're frankly bullshitting and when we're on to something, when we're writing and we feel that this is a natural um, product of our idea versus when we're just adding stuff just to add it because we have no idea what we're doing. And so all I really ask is yeah, be intentional, have an idea. Don't write just to write, but really reflect and put together a story. Again, tell the story only you can write. And if that's your focus, you will do something very interesting. Um, don't forget about the cover letter. Um, so tell me who is your audience, and then tell me kind of what you're doing in the text. What choices are you making? Are you experimenting? Are you breaking any rules? You could break these rules. You could not write these rules at all. You can do your own thing as long as it's a narrative. I don't care. These rules are kind of meant to give everyone something to work with. But if you break my rules, you better have good reason. So if you do break my rules, if you don't write in vignettes, if you don't have an extended metaphor, you need to defend that. You need to tell me why you did that. And if you have a good reason, that's fine. But if you're breaking the rules and not following directions for no reason, we've got a problem. The cover letters where you tell me that. Check the syllabus for that. The syllabus has all the cover letter information. Remember, that's what your um, uh, my response to your writing is based on that cover letter. So the more of the cover letter you write, the more I respond. If you just want like give me your basic evaluation and give me my grade, that's just the first element. You include the second element. I'll do some comments in the margins. I'll read a little more closely, or I'll still read closely no matter what, but I'll comment more closely. And the third element, I will dig in. So remember that. Right. Type 11 or 12, font, standard margins, double spaced, or I prefer single spaced. You can do single spaced, or double spaced. It doesn't matter. And let's change this. So it would be so it'd be 750 to 1,250 words in case you decide to do single space or something like that. So 750 words is 3 pages. 1,250 words is 5 pages. Each double spaced page is around 250 words. And so this is if you decide to do single space, you can just go by word count. I would go by word count kind of no matter what, because some students they'll add a bunch of like spaces, like they'll do like kind of like this number, and like that doesn't help you. I don't count that. That just annoys me. And you don't annoy me while I'm reading your paper because I that affects my grading. So don't annoy me. Don't do weird crap to like expand your paper with nothing. That does not help you, and in fact, directly is going to harm your grade. Um, so let's figure out a due date for this. Today is September 8th. We'll do roughly Do Wednesday, next Wednesday. September 17th. There you go. All right. If you have any questions, email me. We'll be back at it on Wednesday. Um, and yeah, can't wait to read what you write.